Hello, and welcome. Welcome everyone to the Migration Summit and for this special session on hacking access. My name is Lana Cook, Assistant Director of Strategic Initiatives from the MIT Refugee Action Hub. And I'm so pleased for this session this afternoon. The Migration Summit 2022 is organized by MIT React, NAMAL, Karam Foundation, Paper Airplanes, and the MIT Abdul Latif Jameel World Education Lab, JWEL. It is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, nonprofits, NGOs, social enterprises, foundations, philanthropists, researchers, policymakers, employers, governments, really everyone across the ecosystem to come together on the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme of education and workforce development and displacement through virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world. And so today, I'm so pleased here to introduce Alyssa Bryen from the Syrian Youth Empowerment Initiative, who will now take it over and leading us in a participatory workshop. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Lana. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me for 1 second. Okay, can everybody see the giant green screen that says hacking access? All right. Well, I'm here joined by other members of our team, but before we go ahead and introduce ourselves, I just want to walk through what we plan to do with you for this almost 2 hours we're going to be together. So for people that don't know about Syrian Youth Empowerment Initiative and SYE, we're going to start by introducing ourselves a little bit in our model. Then we're going to go through the session goals and the problem definition. And we have amazing 2 of our former students here to kind of share their experience applying to universities around the world. We'll take a quick break if we feel like we need it, and then we'll move into either breakout rooms if enough people are still here on this call by then, or stay together to kind of brainstorm solutions to this problem we're going to present, and we'll share it all out to the group. All of our facilitators will go ahead and introduce themselves when they're sharing their piece, but I'll just do a quick intro of the people that are here today. So I'm joined by Ahmed, who is a current SYE student, class of 2021-2022. He's actually an MIT React student as well and is headed to Haverford for this fall. I am the operations manager at SYE. We have Majed joining us, who's our co-founder. We have Mark, who is an SYE alum. He's a member of our advisory committee and a mentor, and he's also a current MIT student. And Yasmin, who's been on the leadership team for quite a few years now and leads our graduate program. So to start, I'm just going to pass it over to Yasmin to tell a little bit more about the SYE mission and vision and what we've been doing for the past 6 years. Yasmin, you can go ahead.
Love it. Thank you so much, Alyssa. It's really, really nice to be here and to see everyone's faces. My name's Yasmin, as Alyssa said. I am a part of the leadership team and I lead the grad program. I'm also in med school. So just a little bit about SYE's mission and its vision. SYE was started in 2015 by a group of students who'd come to the US to do their undergraduate education, and they were here on a scholarship from Jabbour. And as students who benefited from the program that helped them achieve their educational dream, they wanted to give back, and they wanted to help students who are in positions like theirs in Syria. As some of you may know, currently in Syria, students are struggling to complete their education as they are in a conflict zone. Students have suffered from displacement, sanctions, lack of electricity, lack of water, and an overall lack of resources. Additionally, I mean, the Syrian pound went from 50 liras to $1 to being, I think now around 4,000 to $1. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so paying for anything that's outside of the Syrian currency is incredibly difficult. But despite all these obstacles, there is still a huge pool of students who are defying all odds, studying, doing what they need to with a huge drive to succeed. And they're just sometimes in need of some mentorship. And so SYE came as a resource for a lot of these students. And you pulled upon like the guidance from students who had gone through that process before. It started with just a few volunteers with 19 students, and now we've got hundreds of students who've successfully completed the program, with more to come. The SYE model is composed of many elements. One of the most important, in my opinion, is the mentorship. Our mentors provide support with essay editing, college search, CV building, and become at least when I was mentoring, it was very helpful to build such a beautiful relationship with the students that you are working with. And we additionally provide essay editing support and CV building. We're currently working on a new model for mentorship, actually, stay tuned. We pride ourselves in giving the students these hands-on mentorship they need to get through the college application cycle. We also provide financial support for students throughout the cycle. It's mostly in the form of like application and testing fees, which, given the current state of the Syrian pound, is very difficult for students in countries like Syria to afford. One standardized test could be someone's monthly or yearly income. We have also created a curriculum that's developed over the years, and it provides students with a comprehensive application support that guides them to apply to universities around the world. And we're currently refining a more complete one for the grad program. The one that we currently have is for undergrad. We also have an open source curriculum for students who are admitted to who are not admitted to SYE, so that they could get additional support. And we've seen some really great results from that. And additionally, and probably one of the most important pieces, is the advocacy. We aim to work as advocates for our students. We email universities, we have information sessions, we write letters of recommendation. We try to make connections with universities worldwide and programs that will help our students, our programs, and ultimately also the universities, because they're gaining these amazing new students into their institutions. Next slide, please. And in these 7 years that SYE has been up and running, we have had hundreds of students go through our programs and apply to universities. And I just wanted to share some of these stats from last year. We helped students obtain a collective $13 million in scholarships and financial aid. And our students have gone and gained admissions into some of these incredibly fine institutions listed on the screen. And I also have to plug in, it's not up here, but I have to plug in the results from our grad program. For this year, we had about 15 active students currently, and about 12 of them have received full scholarships to incredibly prestigious programs all over the world, and some of the greatest scholarships for students from the Middle East. I could talk forever about grad, but I'll spare you. SYE is one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life, and I am going to turn it over to Alyssa to speak more about it.
Thank you, Yasmin. We're going to transition now from a little bit about SYE into what we're thinking for this session. So we've seen, and throughout the month of the Migration Summit, we see a lot of different groups getting together to talk about creating new pathways, new scholarships. Over the past year, we've seen an eruption of people very interested in crafting these paths for students that want to pursue higher education. And what we really want to focus on in this session is, how do we make those application processes accessible? So not just looking at how do we create new scholarships, but more so, once we create those scholarships, or once we find those scholarships that exist, how can we make sure that conflict impacted and displaced students can access them? And we really understand that there are lots of different groups at play. So we have the universities, we have CBOs or community-based organizations like ours, we have high schools and students and families all involved. And so we're hoping that here we have representation from some of these different groups, so we can really talk about how to collectively make that an easier process. So in an ideal world, students would be able to stay in their home countries and their countries of residence and pursue higher education if they choose to, or traditional higher education if they choose to. When that's not possible for a lot of conflict impacted students, the countries that they find themselves in maybe don't have a higher education pathway that's accessible. And oftentimes higher education is the way that these students can then go on to be productive members of their communities, give back to their homes, and help rebuild their countries. And so we really want to look at how can we make sure that those students, like any other student anywhere in the world, has access to these global institutions, but not just in the same way as other students, but in a way that makes sense for their conditions. And you know, my background, I worked as a college counselor in the UAE, so I've seen what it looks like when students have access to all of the things they should have access to, and what that college admissions process looks like. And I've seen it when I work with SYE, what happens when students don't have access to those things. And so that's really what we want to hone in on here. For folks that are new to this world of college admissions, we're really going to focus in on the US. This plays out in lots of different countries. We focus a lot on the United States because there are a lot of scholarships available in the United States for our undergraduate students. So this process is very US focused, but it holds true for a lot of contexts. So if you are a student, an international student trying to follow a traditional path to higher education to one of these global institutions, you would have to do all of these things on the left. Take the SAT or ACT. Now, this is becoming optional, but it's not entirely optional at all universities, and this costs money. It's gonna be $159 for a student and an international student, depending on what country they're located in. You have to take English proficiency tests. So that's the TOEFL, the IELTS, the Duolingo. We always say, you know, IELTS isn't even available in Syria. And so Duolingo is a great new kind of intro to here. It's a lot cheaper, but it still costs money to take that test. You have to build your college list. So you have to know where is their money, and you have to understand what these scholarships mean. It takes a lot of searching on the internet. It takes a lot of understanding of what's being shared on university websites. You have to complete your application, including essays, and these essays can be completely foreign. You have to send your SAT, ACT, English proficiency scores, all of which cost money as well. Submit your application. That can cost money for many students, depending on the school. You have to complete financial aid documents. So collecting bank statements, collecting income statements, any kind of proof of what your financials are if you're looking at need-based aid. And then the funny thing we always say is you have to submit those documents, and that itself costs $16 per each university if there's not an alternative pathway. So that's just on the student side alone. Then we look at the high school side. And so if you're in a traditional high school, your counselors and your teachers are expected to write and submit letters of recommendation, submit your transcripts, support any application waiver requests you have. So if you want to get rid of some of these fees, your counselor has to validate that for you in a lot of cases. You have to submit a school report. That's optional, but it's kind of like a background of what your high school looks like. And then sending scores as well. Some universities will accept official SAT scores sent by the high school. So that's kind of the entire picture. I know it's a lot. We just went through this with over 100 students. So we know that this is a lot to do, but this is what the traditional path looks like if you were to have no universities doing anything to accommodate students. And this is fairly traditional of what we see at universities in the US. Okay, rather than me kind of breaking that down again, I'm going to actually let Ahmed and Mark share their experience with this. Ahmed, who just went through it, and Mark, who went through it a couple years ago. And I'm actually going to start with Mark. So I'd love to turn it over to Mark to introduce himself and talk about what that entire application process looked like for him when he was applying.
Thank you. Hello. So I'm a junior at MIT. My name is Mark. I'm majoring in computer science and math. So I'm going to tell you about my journey here and how I decided. Let's start by how I decided to apply here. So when I was in high school, when I first thought about where I'm going to go to college, I did not think about applying to the US because my family's income is around $4K a year. It was very unstable, so like the currency is unstable, so this is just in ballpark. TOEFL and SAT alone would cost me around $400, so that's like 10%. And then it just didn't make sense for me to do that, and I know many students who are even better than me who just, it didn't make sense for them to do that. But I stumbled upon a gold mine. I won a few math competitions. I won prizes because of that, and I used that to cover my SAT and TOEFL. And I figured that I could do the process. But then while I was doing it, it was extremely confusing because, as you could tell, probably English is not my native language. Preparing for TOEFL, SAT was very confusing. The type of questions that are asked in the application are they're very new to me. And because I only decided to apply after I won my prizes, which was after my senior year of high school, I had to take a gap year, but I was also, I didn't do the research on the process. I didn't have peers going through it, so it was very confusing. SYE helped a lot with that. It worked out. I got admitted into MIT. MIT has a generous financial aid package. It was great, but when they do the paperwork, they overestimate student spending by a lot, and I think that this is very common in all institutes. So then what ends up happening is that you don't need as much money as they're saying you would need, and they're actually covering all your need. But the US Embassy would want you to have more money because the statement says that you would need more money. So I had to go through rounds of appealing. Again, it's why he helped with that. I had to ask relatives for money just to put it in a bank account and show the statement and then give it back after. And not everybody has access to that kind of thing. And it was unnecessary to do that. And yeah. So after that, I had more visa issues because I was unlucky and I applied during the travel ban period. So I had to take another gap year because of visa issues. And I had to reapply for a visa multiple times. And each time is like $120, $160 just for the visa application fee. And there's no embassy in Syria, so I needed to go to a different country. And as I mentioned, my finances were not great. I think after the first time, SYE started helping with that, but very unsustainable. And then I had to, at some point, I think I gave up on getting a US visa. And SYE again helped me get a scholarship somewhere else. And then I got my visa last minute before going there. So it was kind of a mess, but then I would wonder here, like, for somebody who doesn't have SYE support, who has invested like 15%-ish of their family's annual income into this process, what would happen if they, like, a year after just didn't get their visa or something didn't work out along the line? It's like extremely like a bad investment on a student's part to do this if they don't have any sort of if they don't have like a clear hope of getting in or somebody supporting them. And so this is my story. I think that Ahmed has remembers a lot more of the struggle of applying. That has been like 4 years ago for me. I only remember struggling with English and essays. There are more stuff, but it's been a while. So I'll instead talk about what I've learned working with other SYE students after I came here. So the first thing that I've learned is that some universities, though it's not very common in the US, but some places ask for in-person interviews. And this creates a very unrealistic burden for somebody to even invest more money just for a specific institute that may or may not accept them. And some of these places have dedicated scholarships for people in war zones. And then it's kind of weird because what kind of people in war zones would have enough money to do this? It's very few people in war zones, so it doesn't make much sense. But it is a pretty good initiative. It's just they need to think about the whole process. They can't just take it over from when the student is admitted. Another thing that I've noticed is that essay prompts can be very triggering for people sometimes. Like MIT has a prompt that says, describe the world you come from and how it shaped your aspirations. If you have had a traumatic experience and you did not receive enough support and you have no one to talk to while you're filling these applications, this can be very triggering. And I think this is one of the reasons having a mentor at SYE is important, but many students go through this alone and it can be challenging. Yeah, and the last thing that this is like my suggestion to some of the problems is to not require testing before, like to give conditional offers. Some places do this, like if you think a student is good enough, provided that they get some score in the SAT, give them the offer and say, if you get that score, we can let you in. And that way, at least they don't have to invest 10% of their income without having any sort of hope of getting somewhere. This is all I have to say. I'm excited to hear what Ahmed has to say because he's more recent.
Thank you, Mark. That was very helpful. Ahmed, go ahead and introduce yourself and share a little bit about your story as well. I hope this is helpful context for everybody in the room that doesn't hear these stories every day like we do. Ahmed, it's your microphone now.
Thank you, Alyssa. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. I'm Ahmed Ahmed from Syria, currently based in Turkey. I'm a student at SYE. I'm also a student at the MIT React program. So 3 years ago, I finished high school. I was living in Saudi Arabia. In my last day of high school, my father was laid off from his job, and we were forced to leave the country on a very, very short notice. And going to Syria was not an option for me for many personal reasons. And this is actually another trauma I have been dealing with for years. So we moved to Turkey, but the financial hardships resulting from my father's job loss and the move hindered my ability to apply to schools in Turkey. My family, as any Syrian family, has already suffered very severe financial losses due to what has been going on in Syria. So it was unthinkable for me just even to take the required exams, just even to take the SAT or the IELTS or the required exams in general. So in the past 3 years, although I didn't get an official education, I kind of created my own learning journey, not only for me, but for my fellow refugees as well. So almost 2 years ago, I founded an educational nonprofit. I started teaching English, math, and basic computer science courses and tutoring high school students for the Turkish entrance exams. Many of these students are currently studying at the best universities here in Turkey. I also discovered my passion for technology, computer science, and data science. I self-led multiple programming languages. I co-authored multiple computer science-related ebooks. I volunteered at the United Nations as an Arabic language tutor. I also worked on human rights, racism, and tech-related projects with Amnesty International. So years ago, I accidentally came across SYE, and as soon as I know about their amazing program, I started filling my application. I submitted my application, and in June 2020, I received an email from SYE saying that I was accepted. So I started working on my application. The college application process was very confusing, very complicated, very time-consuming. But with the help of my mentor, I started researching colleges and navigating scholarships. I started working on my personal statement. I have never written one before. I also started studying for the English proficiency exams and the college entrance exams. So I studied high school in a normal standard public high school. My teachers have never written a recommendation letter before, and my school has literally no experience with the whole process at all. So I was the first student from my school to ever apply to any US university. So I had to spend probably tens of hours explaining everything to my teachers. I also had to email universities to kind of facilitate the process of sending or submitting the letters, the transcripts, and the other required documents. So again, I've literally spent tens of hours just contacting admission offices, trying to explain my situation, my school situation, and also requesting application fee waivers and explaining why I have 3 gap years, which is not a common thing in the US. So I submitted my applications in December 2020, and in April 2021, I was rejected from every single school I applied to, mainly due to high financial need. Obviously, I was very depressed. I didn't know what to do. Should I just give up, or maybe should I try again? But I had a truly wonderful, amazing mentor. He believed in me. He strongly motivated me to apply again. And so I did. I went through the whole process again. I reapplied this year with a much, much stronger application. And just a few weeks ago, I received an acceptance from Haverford College with a full scholarship. So this is my story. This is my experience. And at the end, I just want to say that maybe the hardships of war, displacement, and the very limited financial resources took our childhood away, but they never stole our ambitions. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear me.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ahmed. We were cheering him on. I remember when Ahmed texted me that he got in, it was late at night here, and I started running around my apartment, probably at the same time he was running around his house. So it was all very exciting news. So now that we've heard from the students, I want to revisit kind of that path we first highlighted for the international students and for conflict impacted students, and look at what happens in those contexts. So the first two, testing requirements, those are often cost prohibitive, which we heard from both Mark and Ahmed, which we're very privileged to be able to work with College Board and Duolingo and ETS to help support our students get waivers. But in the absence of that, many of our students would not be able to take those tests. And then I'll also just share internet-based tests. Neither of them mention the internet, but when tests are internet-based, it can be really hard in some of these contexts to keep an internet connection for long enough to take that test. So that's another challenge we see. Now, in terms of building the college list and writing the application, yeah, that's a challenge. That's a new hurdle. Ahmed and Mark both referenced it. A lot of those resources can be found online, but again, it's dependent on a student being able to go seek out those resources and understand them. We look at all the rest of these items that require money, and they're all basically cost prohibitive. And then the financial aid documents, that's also, many students don't have access to that information. So what we heard from both of their stories is that so much of these traditional paths, so much of these traditional steps, actually the burden of them falls on the student, and they really have to reach out to individual universities, like Ahmed said, and understand what they can do for each of those contexts. And we're grateful that we have connections with admissions officers, and we can, share what we know with students. We can share, hey, this school doesn't require these tests, or you can do this with this school. But in the absence of that, this is a lot of work for a student who maybe has a part-time job or has to work to support their family, or is in school and is working. And then we get to the high school side. And I actually think this one is even scarier to me, that in the absence of a supportive high school, we have many students in Turkey. Ahmed, actually, his high school is in Saudi Arabia, but some of our students in Turkey, their high school opened and closed. It was a transition high school for Syrian students. That high school no longer exists. And so I remember we have a group chat called The Turkey Problem with those students. And we're just trying to figure out, how do we get your high school to release your transcripts, to write a letter of recommendation? So even in Ahmed's case, where there was a language barrier and a lack of resources, sometimes it's even more challenging. Sometimes the school doesn't exist anymore, or the administration does not want to support the students because oftentimes there's tension between some of these students and their administrations, or the students have been displaced and they no longer have access to the transcripts. We had a student reach out to us whose transcripts were in Syria and he was in Turkey, and he had no family to go get those transcripts for him. So what happens in those cases? And again, it's almost all falls on the student. So it requires a student to take the initiative to reach out to universities, to reach out to organizations, to email every single university they're thinking about applying and seeing what they can do. And that's a huge time investment for one of these students. So I did this little diagram here. Universities really depend on a supportive high school or local partner. And in the way that they function, the way that they release their applications, they assume that there is an adult or an educational institution in these students' country of residence that can formally or informally credential them. And that's just not the case in a lot of contexts. So we end up losing this entire right side of this circle. And it's really just the university and the student trying to work together to get the student eligible to even get through the application. So I just recap here the challenges that we shared. We talked about them already, but limited access to transcripts, to recommendations and required testing, an inability to submit financial forms, and an inability to afford application fees. These are some of the big ones. And when we get to our breakouts, this will be available for you to have a look at as you're thinking through it. Okay, but it's not all bleak. So this is a lot of bleakness, but there are existing solutions. They're just not scaled in the way we need them to be scaled. So I'm going to walk through some of these so we can get our brains in gear and start rolling and thinking about how we can make some of these solutions work even better. So individual universities have amazing policies that support students. So MIT, for example, MIT does not require the CSS profile, which is the financial aid application, until after a student is admitted. So that means that student can save that $16 and wait until they get the acceptance letter before they file for their financial aid. We have lots of schools that will accept emails from us or from Education USA if their high school does not have the infrastructure in place. We have lots of universities that reduce the fee of the applications. We have universities that come do info sessions and share information about how to write these essays. But the limit here is that these are very individualized and decentralized, and no two schools have the same policy. So in order for a student to understand what they need to do, they would have to contact each of the schools they're thinking about individually. We have Education USA, which many people know that helps with resource and some of this accreditation gaps. What I will share is that Education USA is not actually on the ground in every country. There's not actually an office in Syria. So students that are in displaced situations in a country like Syria don't have an Education USA office on the ground that they can access. We have SYE. We like to think that we're an existing solution, so we can help with a lot of these barriers, the cost, the resource, and the accreditation gaps. But again, I mean, our challenge, not only can we only work with a limited number of students per year, but it's actually a huge time investment for us to research these university policies and build these university networks. And each year we get better about it. We get better at understanding where the challenges are. A new university this year gave a waiver to our students as never before, but that takes years of relationship building with each individual university. There's not a standard policy. There's not a standard person I can reach out to say, hey, we have a student applying to Rice and there's an application fee. I have to go and build that relationship. We have a school like UWC. If you've heard of UWC, it's a great option for students that are displaced if they can get the scholarship to UWC and they can get to a high school that does have support for post-secondary education. Then they can go on and get a Davis scholarship or use the college counselor there to then apply to college. But again, that only works with a limited number of students. So maybe 5 students in Syria. We have one of our students in Turkey headed there next year. There's not a lot of spots for a large amount of students to kind of identify post-secondary options. And then I think my most crazy solution that we really like, but does have its limits as well, is what Jabbour has done, which is create alternative pathways. So they currently have an alternative pathway in Canada where they host their own application and they screen their own students and work with the university to select students through their specialized application pathway that's very specific for Syrian students. This is a really awesome option, but it works only in the Syrian context right now. They're working with Syrian students and with the university. And again, it takes a lot of time to invest and partner with those universities. How quickly can we scale that across multiple universities in multiple countries? So I've talked a lot about existing solutions and I'll let you guys think on it a little bit. But in the meantime, I want to pass it to Majed actually to introduce himself and talk more about the Jabbour model, because he actually received one of these scholarships through this model and can share kind of his experience through there. So Majed.
Thanks, Alyssa. Hi, everybody. My name is Majed. I'm the co-founder of SYE. And I want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about these folks you see on the screen. This is the cohort that came through Jabbour, the nonprofit we mentioned earlier that helped students. And what they did, this was a very unique paradigm that unfortunately is not in existence right now. But what they did is that they reached out to Illinois Tech and established this partnership to say, we have a group of really smart students. It's really great that I describe myself with the smart students. And they are in Syria in different age groups, and they could use this opportunity given the circumstances. That was in 2012, so very early, very early stages of the revolution and the war. Given the circumstances, some of these folks, like myself, were transferring. And myself, I had just been suspended from Damascus University for political activism, and I could not provide any material documents to the university. So literally what I had to show for myself is to say, I can submit an application, I can answer any question you ask me to with whatever English I had back then, which I can assure you it was not that great. But that was pretty much it. I did not take the TOEFL, that was not an option. I did not take the SAT, and now 2 degrees later, I still have never taken the SAT. And I think I'll do terrible if I was to even try. But this was I think, a great model in how the university, by being very contextual with their approach to this specific group of students, can not bend the rules, but rather establish a separate set of guidance to try to assess these students. The students you see on the screen went on to graduate with honors. Some of these students were were speakers at the commencements of their own colleges. On the screen, you see folks who work at Apple, at Google, at Goldman Sachs, at some of the largest companies in the United States. Myself, I keep on looking back to say, I provided them very low materials. They reached out asking for more essays, and I wrote 3 extra essays on top of the application. Then they reached out with some questions via email. They were assessing my application in an email exchange. And at some point, since I'm an architect and going for architecture degree, they asked for a portfolio, and they had a professor in the College of Architecture, which is very uncommon, look at my portfolio and decide, okay, yep, the student can fit here. I went on to graduate from here, and I got admitted to Columbia University, where I got my master's degree and graduated from there as well. All of this would not have been possible had they simply looked at my application as, does he have an SAT? He does not. All right, immediate elimination. Or do we have a proof that he speaks English? Which they didn't at the time, because there's no TOEFL on record. Very simply, the group said, incomplete application, move on to the next person. This is, I refer to it just to say, obviously changed my life, but this is great model to say, there are other ways universities can find talented applicants and get them. And this is not just for the Syrian model, this is for a number of contexts. I mean, now to ask a Ukrainian student to provide documents from their high school, really just not really an option. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'll turn it back to you, Alyssa, and we can talk some more later.
Yeah, no, this is great. And we added some pictures of our more recent students. I think these are two very different models working with very different contexts. And we like smiling faces here. So these are some of our students, and actually Mark and Masoud, two of our recent students, brought all of our new folks that came to the US together in Boston. I believe we're in Boston in this picture. So all of that to be said, we were hoping that before we go into breakout rooms, and I'm not actually sure who's on this call, but I would love if in the comments, or even if somebody wants to raise their hand and unmute themselves, if anyone on this call is a student that's been displaced or impacted by conflict that wants to share a challenge we haven't mentioned, or if there are any organizations or universities that have active solutions in place that they'd like to share out, we would love to leave this space open just for a few minutes so we can collect all the information together in one group. And if nobody has anything to share, we'll just keep chugging along, but I wanted to pause for a second. Feel like we might have done a comprehensive job then. Feel free to keep sending it, but I'm gonna go on to the next slide as well. So what we are hoping to do at this point is break out into a few different breakout rooms and basically come up with solutions to this very large problem, which is applications are not accessible to students in a way that is sustainable. And we are open to any ideas that come out of this. We are open to people zooming in on one of the challenges we presented or all of them at once. And in order to do this, we also just came up with a few starter solutions, that's what I'm going to call them, where we've thought through, okay, we've identified these challenges, let's see if any of these solutions could work. So in your small group, you're welcome to choose one of our solutions and work with it, or to come up with your own. And here is what our solutions look like. So we were thinking about a centralized resource and information hub for displaced and conflict impacted students, something like a place where a student like Ahmed could have gone to just see what he needed to do for all of these universities and who to contact, as opposed to him having to search everything individually and reach out individually. Advocating for internal policy changes at universities themselves and what that would look like, and is there a way that we can build that for universities to use? Solutions like the Jabbour solution, which would be to create specialized scholarship applications, and who would have to be involved in that. Looking at another angle, creating a local partner resource hub for universities. So when a university like MIT gets an application from Syria or from students that are Syrian that were displaced, they know which organization they can reach out to support the applicant, regardless of whether they're working with that applicant. And I will tell you, I've done this for universities in the past where they've reached out and said, hey, can you tell me about the curriculum at public schools in Syria? Because we just got an applicant and we're stumped, do you know? And we've been able to support those students regardless of whether they're ours. So that's something we've thought about. And then creating cross-university coalitions with shared policies. Universities that tour together could have the same policy for conflict impacted students as opposed to each university having their own. These are just some initial thoughts that we have. They are by no means the solution to this very grand problem. And we hope that this will be a place where wild ideas come to be, and we can maybe start conversations around those wild ideas. I have created a collaboration document for us right here, where I've pasted in, you just give it a split second and I'll share it with everybody. I've pasted in the requirements we talked about so everybody can have a look at them and the starter ideas. And then we probably won't have 5 breakouts based on some people dropping off, but whatever breakout room you're in, if you could just go down to your room so you can take some notes for us, because we can't be in all the rooms. So designate somebody to take notes. And then we've put some questions here that we'd love you to think through. So once you look at a solution you have, who should be involved in the design and implementation? Who needs to lead it? Who needs to be looped in? Don't worry if that person is not in your breakout room, just kind of put down the idea of, say, the university needs to lead this. What are the steps that need to be taken? What are the challenges that may come with a solution? And then is there something at a smaller scale that we could implement right away, that we could leave this call and say, this is what we're going to do based on our solution? So that's what I'm leaving us with now. Don't worry if you're new to this. I think there's some people on the call who are new to this experience. Your ideas will be just as welcome as universities and big organizations that have been doing this. In fact, I will say Ahmed comes to us with some of the best ideas of anybody. Every time I sent him some notes and I was like, mentor challenge, what do we do? And he gave me the best feedback. So know that your feedback is probably more helpful than ours who've been doing this for so long. So yeah, but before we go into breakout rooms, I'd love if there are any questions while we're all together. Maybe we can just stop sharing and leave some space for questions before we break people out into breakout rooms. Yes, thank you. I will share the link right now.
I would say maybe something just as a comment. I've also, facilitated a couple of hackathons, and I think it's important for everyone working on the breakout room to just like hear the other peer and just like, there are not bad answers or bad solutions, like I think it's just important for everyone to just say what they're thinking from their personal experience, and for everyone to be like flexible and to what is happening inside of the breakout.
Lana, I just sent the link right above. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, Lana, then we can break out at complete random. So I would just say, there's 23 people on here. Let's do breakout rooms with 4 to 5 people in each. And I don't know if you want me to do it or not, but if you could just separate the SYE folks across the rooms. And Hannah is also one of ours if you want her to be in a room separate from us as well.
Great, setting them up now. So if anybody has other questions you want to jump in while we wait. One question actually, as I'm just setting these up. You gave the great example of the MIT application and about like the essay question around like describe your world and how that can be kind of a triggering, prompt for somebody to reflect and to write about. What would be your suggestion if they were going to change that essay question or prompt? How would you reframe it?
So I'm honestly not quite sure, but I think that maybe being conscious of that while evaluating essays is good, because if somebody didn't have proper support, it might show in their application and it might appear as if they are not creative or something. But if you look somewhere else, you could find evidence for otherwise, and then you could reason about it. I'm not sure if there's a different way to phrase it that would help against that. But I guess like a student having a support network and evaluating the answers with that in mind could be useful. And maybe MIT actually has a lot of very helpful admission blogs. If they wanna, I'm not sure if they talked about that, but if they talk about that, it could also be very validating for a student going through that.
Thank you. Okay, so I am going to open up all the rooms. SYE folks, if you find yourself in a cluster, I think I separated as much, feel free to jump to other rooms. You'll have that permission. All right. So we'll see everybody back in 20 minutes. I'll broadcast out the link if you hadn't get a chance to get it already.
his group was on fire and said something like a map, and I just got to know what the map is. But I would love for each group to maybe just give some notes, and even if your group just got through like more brainstorming of challenges and not to a solution, still definitely share whatever came out of that group, because I think that would be useful for us all to hear. Is there a volunteer by raise of hand that wants to go first? If not, we can just go in order of breakout room numbers. Oh, there was no map. Majed's an architect, so he just had his work. I was excited.
I think 1, 2, 3, 4 would make sense.
Perfect.
Or-
Sure. Group 1, it's Laura, Hamza, Majed, and Juan.
I'll just note that we still have a few people who are still hanging out in their breakout rooms. So
okay.
they should be back here in just a few seconds.
Great. From our room, Laura, do you want to share? Go for it. There, and you have to document. I tried to do a good job facilitating or note taking, so hopefully this is good.
Okay. Also, Juan and Hamza, please feel free to fill in. We talked a lot. We focused on resource hubs and how to make resources more clear, both to universities and university-focused resources, but as well as student access. And we're seeing this as a pretty big gap in terms of creating a one-stop shop, because we talked about that it's a lot of responsibility to maintain and to make sure we have all that up-to-date information. But we also talked about how the importance of equity and making sure we get this information to as many people as possible, and students around the world are able to access information in order to be able to access the whole process. And I'm trying to think, there was a lot. Yeah, just really making sure that we can really get information that reflects also the diversity of challenges that different students face around the world, given that each context is so different. And so making sure both universities and individuals are able to navigate those. And what else did I miss? Anything? A quick overview.
We can pause between each if people have questions or thoughts. So I have a question for all of you, because I've been thinking about this, is like, how realistic and tangible do you think that creating a resource hub is in the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? Like, is this possible? Do we feel like universities and students and organizations would buy into something like this in a short-term or long-term kind of world?
I feel okay. I feel yes, just because I do feel like there are a lot of networks being created